Well, welcome. I'm so glad you took time out of your busy schedule to join us here today. And that's something I don't take for granted. I recognize we all have busy lives. And because of that, I want to make sure we give you as much value as possible from every episode. And today, hold on to your horses because today will certainly be no exception. I'm really excited. We've got the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Keith Dorsey today, and we're going to be talking about breaking barriers and building board power, and how women and other underrepresented leaders can claim and transform the boardroom. So welcome, Keith. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Cindy. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and for those of you who may not know him yet, Keith is someone whose work aligns, I think, really beautifully with everything we stand for here at the Art of Feminine Negotiation. It's one of the reasons I thought I did not hesitate to, when I heard what he did, to say, got to get him on the show. He is governance expert, an executive advisor. He's author of The Boardroom Journey, Practical Guidance for Women to Secure a Seat at the Table. And I love the specificity of that. And we pay a lot of lip service, but there's not actually been a lot of expert work done on it. And after decades of advising C-suite leaders, including Fortune 500 executives, Dr. Dorsey devoted his doctoral research to uncovering the actual structural barriers that women and other underrepresented groups face in pursuing these board seats that we hear so much about. So his mission now is to equip women with the tools, with the networks, the strategies to move from just aspiration to actual board influence. So it's going to be an inspiring, actionable conversation for women, for underrepresented groups, for all of their allies, and anybody who's looking to take their leadership to the next level. So Keith, why don't we jump in with what sparked your commitment to helping women and particularly underrepresented leaders sort of break through these boardroom barriers? Was there an inflection point in your professional or research journey? How did it happen?
First of all, Cindy, that's quite the introduction, so I hope I can live up to that. So thank you again.
I have no doubt.
And you know, secondly, it's a bit of a story. This has been a serendipitous journey for me. And, during this third chapter that I'm in, the first was the US military for a number of years. The second was corporate America for almost 30 years, running very large sales teams for Fortune 1000 and Fortune 500 for, like I said, just over 29 years. And then I entered this third chapter. And in this third chapter, I do a bit of executive advisory work, and I also serve on several boards. And then I went back to school full time to get my doctorate in
Wow.
organizational change and leadership.
Yeah.
And when I went back to school at the University of Southern California, my problem of practice was going to be around shareholder primacy on corporate boards.
Okay.
And I decided 1 month into my doctorate and really beginning my research, one Saturday I was sitting at my desk and I had a project that was due on Monday. And so I sat down to read a bunch of journals and white papers and case studies, different things like that around shareholder primacy on corporate boards. And 4 hours later on that Saturday, I lift my head up and I have been reading many things about the lack of gender diversity on corporate boards.
Yeah.
And I just sat there and I said, how the heck did I end up down that rabbit hole? I
Yeah.
was supposed to be reading something completely different. And I ended up there and I asked myself, Keith, are you interested in this topic or are you procrastinating? And if I'm going to tell you the truth, Cindy, I giggled and I said I was procrastinating.
Yeah.
But I was burnt for Saturday and now I'm behind. So on Sunday, I start my research again. I lift my head up 2 hours later, and I've been reading things about the lack of ethnic diversity on corporate boards. And and at that particular point, I said, I'm not procrastinating. I'm passionate. I'm interested in this topic. And on Monday, I went back to University of Southern California, and I changed my problem of practice for the rest of my doctorate
Wow.
from what it was, the shareholder primacy on corporate boards to the lack of gender and ethnic diversity on corporate boards. And I spent the next few years really researching what was going on. And as a corporate executive and my 20 plus years in corporate America, I was a turnaround specialist. I would move from city to city, taking over
Okay.
struggling sales districts, teams, things like that. And I would lift the hood of the car, if you will, to see if they had a people, product, or process issue, and then begin to make the necessary tweaks.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I would turn things around. And I transferred those skills over to this wicked problem called corporate board diversity. And I just started doing research and then conducting studies. And what I found when I was meeting up with extremely successful executive women who have made that transition to corporate boards, I wanted to find out what their enablers were, what were their barriers, and more about their just their career.
Yeah.
And in doing so, one of the things that shocked me the most was the fact that many women thought their story was very unique and, just unique to
Yeah.
them. But I started to uncover themes.
Yeah.
And it was in those themes that I started to look at it from a different mindset because I did not come from this background at all.
Yeah.
And I said, I think we could tweak this and we could tweak that. But that's how I got involved in this area. It was a serendipitous journey where I kind of let go and let God, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, it's like it called to you, right? I mean, you were trying to go in another direction and it kept throwing research
Really,
up in your face that took you somewhere else. I love that.
I
And
really
kudos to
was.
you in your third chapter to go in for a doctorate. That's pretty impressive. Now, in your book, you talk about the boardroom gap, I think you call it, right? That persistent disconnect between qualified women and actual board appointments. So, what would you say people most misunderstand maybe about how the gap is created and maintained?
Some people thought that there was just malicious behavior
Mhm.
and that the majority of the boards had men on the boards and that the men wanted it to be a men's club.
Yeah.
And I think there are bad actors out there, but that what I have uncovered in my research, that's not necessarily the case. Many different ways that people think about finding their next board member. Most would actually think about the fact that, well, they would sit at a board table and they would ask all the board members, we're about to have this person term out and that person term out. Who do you know? And when you have a bunch of men sitting around the
Yeah.
table and they just think of other men. And then there was the myth out there that we would bring on more women if there were more qualified women out there. And that was a myth. They just weren't fishing in the right ponds, if you
Yeah.
will. But most, because they would ask, who do they know? And most of the people that were on that board today came from clubs and organizations and roles that were occupied by mostly men. And so the gap came in where if we can get boards to think about where they find their board members. And then if we can also get boards to think about what they're ultimately trying to solve for when
Yeah.
they bring on a board member. And so to ask different questions, to really think about the skill sets of the board members that are on that board today, to really think about the competencies of those board members, and then to think about the strategy
Yeah.
of the company.
Yeah.
Where are they trying to go in the next 3 to 5 years? And with all of that data now, where do we have a redundancy of skill sets and competencies? And where do we have gaps as those gaps relate to what we really need to have on the board to work towards that strategy?
Yeah.
In that case, when you begin to peel that onion back, you can find that you need people with HR background, talent background,
Yeah.
supply chain background, cybersecurity, AI. And so the list goes on. Whereas before, the majority of the board members were coming from CEO positions and CFO positions. And both of those positions for many years, especially when you think about the Fortune 1000, were heavily populated by men.
Yeah.
But it takes intestinal fortitude of a consultant or a search professional or a non-gov chair to ask, do we really need another CEO?
Yeah.
We have eight
Yeah.
current or active or
Yeah.
former CEOs on our board today, do we really need a ninth?
Yeah.
And so when we begin to think about it in a strategic sort of way as to where we have gaps when it comes to aligning our talent and our functional skills and competencies, align that with our strategy looking forward, then we can uncover many areas where there are so many qualified executive women and government officials that can be just perfect for that board.
Yeah. And I want to really put a pin in that for a moment and pause for our listeners. What Keith is sharing with you now applies not just for board positions, but as you were talking, Keith, it reminded me of so many times over the course of my career, whether you're hiring for staff within an organization, whether you're creating negotiation teams or any kind of team, frankly, we often it becomes this sort of popularity, or as you say, Keith, who you know to bring in. And
Mhm.
people often, in my work as a labor lawyer, even with our trade unions, when they'd get their negotiating committees together, and I would sit down and go, did you guys consider the range of skills that you need going into these negotiations and make sure you've got somebody who's a great note taker, somebody who's a great listener, somebody who knows numbers, somebody who's got that the membership is going to listen to so that and I think we often undervalue that. So, for our listeners, I want you to think about areas in your life where maybe sitting down with a little more forethought about all of the various types of skills and strategies and personalities that you need to help get you to that next level and the next level again. Be more intentional. And as you were talking, one of the things I was dying to ask, I'm wondering, because you've done so much doctoral research and uncovered these structural barriers that are faced in pursuing board seats. What's something that surprised you the most in your research? Something that jumped out at you that you were like, wow, I did not expect that.
Well, one I already mentioned, one of the big surprises was that the majority of the people thought their journey to the boardroom was very
Yeah,
unique to them.
yeah,
That one really caught me off guard. And to find those themes that others that can be taught to others was exciting. Another thing that jumped out at me that caught me completely off guard was we all grew up with this saying that it's not what you know, is who you know.
yeah,
And we use that saying throughout our career
yeah,
to instead of putting our resume or bio or CV in, through an applicant tracking system and hope that there were enough keywords in whatever we put through that system
yeah,
so that their applicant tracking system will then take it from that large group and put it in a smaller group and then put that in front of the talent acquisition or HR people and we'll get an interview. We figured out a hack a long time ago that if we can know someone who knows who's interviewing for that or the interviewer for that position, we can then have that person introduce us to that person and put our CV directly in front of them and avoid the whole applicant tracking system. And so that works perfectly in that whole saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But when it comes to corporate boards, there's this process that we call pre-vetting. And with this whole pre-vetting process, before someone reaches out to you, whether they're a search professional or the board themselves, we would have already reached out to people who know you that get their thoughts about whether or not we should reach out to you or not.
yeah,
And so we also grew up with this whole idea that there's 6 degrees of separation. But when you have platforms like LinkedIn, where I can look you up and see who do I know who knows you. Now there's only, 1 or 2 degrees of separation many times. And because of that, we pre-vet people. And so once we pre-vet someone, if they have favorable things to say about you, you'll get a phone call
yeah,
about that board position. If they don't have favorable things to say about you and you feel your ears burning, but no one ever called because the whole process stopped there. And
yeah,
so one of the themes that came from out of my research that really fascinated me was it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's actually who knows you
yeah. Uh,
that get you on a board. And it seems so obvious when you hear it. And it ended up being a drop the mic sort of a drop the mic thing that I uncovered, but it works and it's true. And the example that I give, because there's this, the research has shown that about 67 to 75% of the board seats are filled by your people from your network,
Yeah.
not necessarily from a search professional.
Yeah.
And so people in a lot of board readiness programs really preach network, network, network. But they don't always say, well, what does that mean? And so most people say, well, networking to me means squeezing palms, kissing babies, and handing out my business card. What I uncovered from my research, the way that those women executives that are now board members networked was a little different. Now, what things happen by just giving someone a business card, telling them your board readiness story, your elevator pitch? Yes, it can work that way, but the most prevalent way that people network would be by speaking on panels, fireside chats, writing blogs, writing articles, different things like that. And here's the example I often share. If you're serving on a panel, you're on the main stage and there's 1,000 people in the audience, and you scan the audience and you recognize about 30 people out there. That's who you know.
Yeah.
But by the time you're done, 970 more people
Yeah.
know you, and the chances of you knowing them are very, very slim.
Yeah.
And if they liked what you had to say,
Yeah.
they would think about you if they are serving on the board and they say Mary's about to term out. Who do you know? We need to replace Mary. And people would say, I had the opportunity 7 months ago to hear Sally speak about this topic. I really liked the way her mind worked. I liked the way she thought. And I think she could be good on this board.
Yeah.
Sally may not know anyone on that board,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they know her. So it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Well,
That
and
was
that's
big aha.
that is a big aha, and it's such an important point. And again, for our listeners, it's something we talk about often around the art of feminine negotiation because we're so be careful and intentional about who you show up as, right? In all of your interactions, we often think we're dealing with somebody and it's just a one-off, maybe, so we don't have to worry about it, and we don't show up as the best version of ourselves, and we don't really listen, and maybe we're a little exploitative because we get what we want and then some. But that often has a way of coming back to bite you in the ass because, as Keith's saying, you never know who that person knows. And next time down the road, whether it's for a board position or another negotiation or a job hire, and somebody's like, "What do you mean you're thinking about bringing Cindy on board? Are you kidding? I had an interaction with her and she was you know what, with a capital B, right?" So
Yes.
be intentional about how you show up in all of your interactions, whether you think you're going to be dealing with that particular person or group or organization again or not. Now,
You never know, Cindy. And just to add a bit more regarding that, in the book, The Boardroom Journey, I talk a bit about like if even if you were in a 12-step program, going back and repairing
yes.
those relationships. And I give specific examples as to how, because what got you here may not get you there. And who you are now might not be who you were back then. And good people make bad decisions
Yeah.
and make mistakes.
Yeah.
And to be able to say mea culpa and the way I behaved back then, I apologize.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do
Yeah.
from because of platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and others. You can find some of those people that you once wronged. Trust me, we will find them.
Yeah.
You don't want us talking to them
Yeah.
without your intervention. And so by reaching out and connecting with them via LinkedIn and genuinely liking certain posts. And then
Yeah.
after a few likes, they may even reach out to you and say, how are you doing? It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
How are you, or you can reach out to them and say, I would love to have a virtual coffee with you just to catch up. There are a few things I would love to share with you. And that gives you the opportunity to say, I've grown
Oh,
and I want you to know that. And
I
I
love
apologize.
that. And thank you for that reminder, even for me personally, and for our listeners out there. You've often, those of you who are regulars know, you've heard me say, when I started practice of law, fresh faced out of law school, I looked around, I was the only woman, and I thought, geesh, I got to get scrappier to be taken seriously, which sadly was the model back then. And my clients called me the Barracuda, which they meant as a compliment. So, and I really leaned into that. And there are days now, I mean, it's been, gosh, well over a decade since I've started this art of feminine negotiation, but you make a great point. Go back and make reparations for all those people who no doubt considered me an absolute raving bitch across the table, frankly. And maybe it,
And it may have served us well at that point.
yes,
The world's dynamic. Our social constructs are dynamic, and we may have burned a bridge or two, and I highly recommend repairing those.
I love that. I love that. Now, we were talking a bit about some of the structural barriers. Would that be the one, like which one would you consider to be the most underestimated? Would it be that one about, and
That one's a big one, the 2 degrees of separation. And then also realizing when it comes to board work, a lot of people think the best way to get on the board is to talk with just more board members. That's good. That's a component.
yeah,
It's multifaceted though. Or to associate yourself with many CEOs and let these board members and CEOs know that you would like a board seat
yeah,
yourself. That's a big one. But that's not how most people are getting their boards. That's a component.
yeah,
I was shocked in my research that people were being nominated for boards and recommended for boards that, and it was coming from obscure individuals, their
mm,
babies, their dog walker, the
wow,
janitor that collects the trash in the evenings. And I can give you examples, but this what I got from out of that is if board work is what you want and you can condense and there are steps to get there to condense your elevator pitch to a point where people understand what you're seeking and why. But then tell everyone that you are interested in the board. And the way that I recommend people do that in our society, whenever we go to a cocktail party or we're at an event or you're sitting at a round table with 7 other people at the table, the first question someone will ask you at your kid's soccer game or whatever the case when they meet you is, what do you do?
yeah,
And when we answer, we go into this 30-second autopilot, 23-second autopilot, just speech about what we do. And it's really around what we do for our vocation.
yeah,
And that's what we tell them. And I challenge people to add an additional 7 to 11 more seconds to your autopilot speech when someone asks what you do and say, and I serve on 2 nonprofit boards, and I'm looking for a private company board in the manufacturing industry because of my background. I know I can add value
that's a great
just
tip.
by adding that additional, because you can't expect people to know
Yeah,
what you want. And if you can't articulate it in a succinct way, they won't remember.
yeah,
But most will never add that. They talk about their vocation, but not everything that they're actually doing. And to be able to take an additional 7 to 11 seconds. Here's an example, a couple. I have many in the book, but here's one. A woman works in her office late in the evening, 2 to 3 times a week. And the person that collects her trash one time got enough courage to say, I've seen you here many times for many months. And I'm curious, what do you do? And when she told the person who's been collecting her trash for months, what she did and she incorporated that additional 7 to 11 more
yeah.
seconds, he said, that great. That's nice to know. That janitor went to his sister's dinner party 2 weeks later. And the sister said at the dinner party, I'm having the hardest time finding this next board member. Well, what are you looking for, sis? We're looking for something like this. She said, I have someone I want you to meet. She
Yeah,
got that board position.
that's awesome.
So anyone, everyone.
Yeah, I love that. And again, so simple, right? So, and for our listeners, take down notes here, pay attention. Some of these are really simple, actionable steps that you can take that'll move the dial for you. And that reminds me, I want to talk about, because I know in the book, Keith, you outline sort of visible and invisible barriers that impact, women's board readiness signals, I guess, for want of a better term. So can you quickly break down sort of what some of those are and how we can more strategically navigate them?
When it comes to the visible barriers, those are the obvious ones where, people talk about there's not enough qualified women out there, or they aren't looking for people that have the background where most women have their executive or government experience. Those are some of more of those visible barriers, but the invisible barriers are the ones that we are talking about. Many executives expect people to connect the dots for them.
Hmm.
If I tell you how great I am,
Yeah,
and you will be able to figure out based on that where I best fit.
yeah,
And so logically, that makes sense. But most executives will go about it that route. The barrier there is when you're done talking to that individual, they go back to whatever fires they need to put out.
yeah, yeah,
They they go back to doing their vocation. We want the board position. We think about it 24/7. Unfortunately, they don't think about us the same way. So being an incredible and an exceptional executive or government official that's seeking a board position is table stakes.
yeah,
All the other people that you're competing against bring that to the table. You have to be able to differentiate yourself and tell your story and connect the dots in your story. But don't tell your story in a way like you've done the many times you interview for other executive roles
yeah,
or whatever role you got to get your next promotion. Don't interview that way. That's where we tell them our strengths and we give them examples about how we exhibit those strengths in the past and different things like that. That's really, really talking about all the things that happened in the past.
yeah,
That will get you on a board.
yeah,
I tell people when you're interviewing for a board position, you want to interview for a board position in a way, and I relate it to driving a car. If you're driving a car and you spend all your time looking through the rearview mirror, you're going to have problems.
yeah,
And everything in the rearview mirror are areas that you've already passed. Well, to convert that to interviewing for a board position, that's telling them about what everything you've done in your past. And that's table stakes for the most part. A good board interview is where you're looking out the front windshield and you don't only see what's right in front of you, you could tell them what's around the S curve and that sharp right curve because this isn't your first rodeo. You've been there before. You bring such a human capital. You have social capital and a network behind that Y curve. You could ask them, you could bring that to the table and the way that you exhibit that and this invisible barrier that existed was within.
yeah,
And the best way you can show them this is by asking questions,
yeah,
asking thought-provoking
yeah,
questions that proves your human capital without telling them all the great things you've done. But because you ask them thought-provoking questions that only someone that would have that human capital would ask, and it's more about things that are strategic down the road, that's the best way to get rid of that invisible barrier that exists there, if you will. And that's just one example. There
yeah,
are many examples to show up like someone that they would like to be sitting next to them
yeah,
who would ask the management team thought-provoking questions about things that are down the road.
yeah.
That interview the exact same way.
And we overlook that. And in fact, I think we've been taught the opposite, right? That success is the person who's talking the most and the loudest. And in fact, I find, and again, those of you who are familiar with my stuff, the art of curiosity, right? Get curious. As Keith's saying, ask those questions. And these apply for boards and also even just in your career advancement, frankly, when you're looking for those big promotions for any of our listeners, absolutely have your brag list about your, as Keith said, your past, the
Yes,
commendations, both the tangible and intangible, but also be future proofing yourself. Let them know, A, you plan on being there in the long term, that you're thinking ahead, that you have something concrete to be able to offer that's more forward thinking. So I love that.
absolutely, Cindy. And the saying there is be more interested than interesting.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Now, what would you say for, I think for some women, they think that aiming for a board seat maybe feels too ego driven or too bold. So, one of our most important negotiations, I often say, is negotiating with ourselves, our mindset. So, what mindset shift do you think is essential for women to sort of stop playing small when it comes to the boardroom?
And I think it's chapter 12 in my book. I talk about future proofing your failure proofing your journey.
Mm.
And that's all about getting in the right mindset. And then in the first section of that chapter, I talk about getting rid of or knowing your naysayers. And your biggest naysayer oftentimes is yourself.
Yeah.
Those stories we tell ourselves
Yeah.
and that imposter syndrome. And so to be able to, one, understand what you want and why you want it. And so I ask people to deal with what you're talking about here, Cindy, is to, first of all, reflect and figure out what brings them joy.
Yeah.
Then reflect on their why. Why do you want to be on a corporate
Yeah.
board? And make certain that your why holds water. And then dive into what's your secret sauce? When you're successful, why are you successful?
Yeah.
And what superpowers do you typically bring to a situation? And when you fail, why do you fail?
Yeah.
And when you win, why do you win? And when you begin to answer those questions, you could really begin to hone in what type of board is right for you,
Yeah.
what maturity level of the business, what size board, whether it's private, public, is it small cap, mid cap, large cap, family owned. When you begin to spend that necessary time reflecting to figure out what makes you tick, you show up differently when you interview.
Yeah.
And so you get two extremely qualified individuals interviewing, and one is just mildly interested in that industry, and but they really just want to get on a paid board and they're qualified. They can sit amongst all the other board members and show up very, very well. But the person you're competing against found their sweet spot. They did all their homework. They reflected like crazy, and they're only interviewing in spots where they know they can add a tremendous amount of value and it brings them joy.
Yeah. So
When
good.
they answer the questions and they present their story, the energy that's popping off of them
Yeah.
is just night and day.
Yeah.
You're both extremely qualified. You both will be assets to that board. But
Yeah.
the one who gets selected got selected
Yeah.
because they were in your sweet spot.
Yeah.
Spend your time figuring out where your sweet spot is, and that will eliminate, when you do that, some of that bad, or I call it stinking thinking,
Yeah.
those bad stories that we have within ourselves,
Yeah.
because you're in your sweet spot and the authentic you shows up.
Yeah.
Most executives do not do what I just mentioned.
Yeah. And it's again
So
so simple. I love we're so aligned, Keith. Like it's fine. One of my models, I call it the 5W model, and you've just like taken it to another level in the context of boards, right? And that people forget about the why. And that when even when you're talking about money, everybody goes, well, it's never just about the money. It's about what that money represents to you, to the people that you're dealing with. So exploring all of those W's, right? Who do I want to show up as? Why does this matter to me? Why does it matter to them? Brings a whole different energy. Now, I can't
it
believe
really
how
does.
quick our time is going here. So I wanted to make sure we have a chance. So for anybody who's listening right now there and thinking, one day I'd love to be on a board, but I don't know where to start. What would you suggest is the first step they should take?
The first step is to reflect, to truly reflect on why, and some people may not like after they reflect it. there are reasons
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
You they may not like it, and so in the book I have four protagonists in there because I want every person that reads the book to find themselves in one of those protagonists or a combination of them. And so these four women, one is a 25-year-old brand new manager in a corporation. The second one is a 40-year-old newly appointed senior manager in a corporation. The third one is a 55-year-old woman who says she's going to retire in the next 3 to 5 years. And the fourth one is a second generation family business CEO who has been in the CEO role for the past 12 years, but she's about to turn the business over to her much younger brother. All four women stated that they would like to serve on a corporate board, a private or a public board at some point. Well, I write the book in such a way that I bring in a case study at the end of every single chapter, two or four of these women, because all four women would like to be on a corporate board. Well, taking whatever was taught in that chapter, what should they be doing? How would they use it? So, what should they be doing throughout their career to orchestrate their career to be not only seen, but known and prepared for a board role with this intentionality? If I couldn't even spell board
Yeah.
at the age of 30. I just luckily my career luckily went that direction, and my human capital was attractive towards.
Yeah.
That was luck. Let's not use hope as a strategy or luck as a strategy. It worked out for me.
Yeah.
I want people to be more intentional.
Yeah.
And so I would get promoted. And when I got promoted, I took the role or offered a role. When I took it, I accepted it because they wanted to pay me more money. And guess what? They liked me. They wanted me,
Yeah.
and that felt good. But I didn't have a strategy as to which roles I took. In the book, especially with the 25-year-old and the 40-year-old, I really talk about being intentional about your next role because of where you ultimately would
Yeah.
like to be.
Nice.
So that's what I recommend, that you figure out what you want and then begin to reverse engineer what you want
Yeah.
based on your goal and then execute on it.
Yeah.
But know what you need to do to execute. Get with the right board readiness program. Become a student of the profession of governance, but then learn from others. And that's what the boardroom journey is about, learning from others as to what those themes and then execute on those themes.
Yeah. I love it. Such great advice we've had consistently. And just real quick before we have to sign off, I normally end by always asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be about boards, nothing. It can be just one of those aha moments for you, Keith. What would you say?
The mindset shift for me was because I've been very goal oriented, and I come from sales, and they said salespeople are coin operated. And one of the mindset shifts I found was making money is important. The money part is important, but by focusing on, especially as a leader, finding out the personal motivations and the professional motivations of every single person that reports up to me and making certain that I spend my time helping them with their personal goals and their professional goals.
Yeah.
When I did that, when I made that mind shift about making everything about them, the byproduct of that
Oh,
was my success and my income.
yeah. That's awesome. Beautiful. And where can people learn more about you?
Well, several places. My website is boardroomjourney.com. So you could definitely learn more about me and my business, the consulting business, my board readiness coaching, and different things like that. And my LinkedIn is Dr. Keith D. Dorsey.
Okay.
You can find me under there.
Okay.
And that's how you can learn much more about me.
That's perfect. Well, Keith, thank you so much for sharing, your wisdom, your insights, and your passion, frankly, for helping women rise into the boardrooms where their leadership is, I think, so needed these days. And I know our listeners are going to walk away feeling not only empowered, but equipped to take those next steps in their journey, their own leadership journey. So, and to our listeners, be sure to check out Dr. Dorsey's book, Boardroom Journey, explore his work for women leaders and underrepresented leaders. And until next time, remember that the power to negotiate your best life begins within. So thanks so much for joining us today, Keith.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I have no doubt for our listeners that you got lots of value from this episode. You know, as always, we covered a lot of ground today, so make sure to go back, re-listen to it, subscribe if you haven't done that, and share this episode with women in your life who you know might be interested in this journey and don't know where to start. And before we sign off, if this episode maybe lit a fire in you, if you're ready to stop playing small and start negotiating bigger, feel free to check out my program so you can negotiate your best life. Whether it's one-on-one in a powerful group or through my online programs, I've got you covered. Let's tap into that feminine power of yours and start getting you more of what you want and deserve without apology. If you're in, head to artoffemininenegotiation.com to check it out. And make sure to grab a copy of my book, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you have not done that yet. And that's a wrap for this episode. Now go renegotiate the life they told you to settle for. And remember that every moment is a negotiation. Choose presence, choose power, choose purpose. I like to think this isn't just a podcast, but a movement, and you're part of something bigger. So together we're redefining power, one conversation, one negotiation at a time. Join the movement and lead the change. And please lead with heart, negotiating like the powerful force of nature that you are, because feminine doesn't mean weak, it means unstoppable in the right hands. Until next time, take care.